Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Keep in touch with what I'm doing on Twitter, Webster G. Tarpley, and, of course, at tarpley.net, where you can find a compendium of various media, radio interviews, various languages, too, of course. Take a look at the French, German, Italian, Russian, and other departments on that website. So Mubarak had crossed the U.S. He had refused. In August of 2009, Mubarak had said no to the main gambit of U.S. diplomacy against Iran, the main thing going on in the Middle East, which was to assemble this front of Sunni Arab states with Israel in it and do that under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, create a war alliance with U.S. backing and play those countries as cannon fodder against Iran and get rid of everybody, that being the U.S. goal, similar to what the British were trying to do with Hitler and Stalin in the time leading up to World War II. Mubarak also opposed to the very obvious U.S. destabilization scheme for Lebanon, which is to assemble this commission of puppet jurists and others in the United Nations and then have them indict Hezbollah as the guilty party in the assassination of then Prime Minister Hariri of Lebanon back in 2005. And you can even find other areas of conflict. Back in 2006, 2007, Mubarak was heard telling the Bush administration, hey, wait a minute, you're leaving Iraq too fast. There are dangers in what you're doing. Maybe you should try to cool that and slow it down. So on the whole, a stubborn, independent, prickly, self-confident, gruff old guy who would not go along with the latest crack-brain schemes of the utopian planners in the State Department, the National Security Council, the Pentagon, and elsewhere in the U.S. regime. So this is why he had to go. Also, not following orders enough on the International Monetary Fund side, taking very slow steps to get rid of these subsidies on bread, but not anxious to go all the way. We'll have more on that stuff next week. On the whole, somebody who was not following orders, and the U.S. answer to that, of course, is always, well, if our entrenched puppets of the past, the client states that we created, if they're becoming increasingly independent-minded and bucking us and giving us a hard time and telling us no and coming up with reasons, well, then let's organize a coup. And that is the naked, brutal reality of what went on here behind the scenes. Of course, in the front of all this, you've got the golden youth, you've got their aspirations, the pathos of these people. The society, since Obama has convinced itself somehow that the youth is the bearer of salvation of society, very dangerous idea. A very dangerous idea which was widespread in the Weimar Republic in Germany in the late 1920s and early 1930s. And look what that led to. Not good. Now, what could be done for Egypt? Well, Obama is supposed to be giving a speech just about now. It's got 1:40 on Friday afternoon as I record this. What I would do, if I had influence over this, is I would say, I am announcing an immediate Berlin airlift delivery of several million tons of grain to Egypt. I want grain to become plentiful. I want the price of bread to go down. I want foodstuffs to be widely at the disposition of the Egyptian population. You want to salute their bravery. That's fine, too. Get the grain flowing, whatever the U.S. has been doing. Emergency food aid, boxcar numbers, airlift, sea lift, get it in there. And at that point, you could also then say that the Egyptian government, whatever that is, should then take measures to strengthen the subsidy regime, to lower the price of bread, to lower the price of cooking oil, to lower the price of gasoline and other fuels, to go back to a more robust system of subsidies as a means of defending this vulnerable population against the speculative excesses that are now going on in the world commodity markets, where the sharks and speculative hyenas have been gathering for quite a while. I would also say it's time to increase the general minimum wage in Egypt. You see that Mubarak in the last days of his rule, Mubarak had raised the wages of government workers. That's fine. It was too late for him. It didn't help him very much politically. I don't think Mubarak was defeated politically within Egypt. I think he was defeated by some kind of threat involving something more personal in regard to him, something to do with his family. But the increase in the minimum wage for everybody would be an obvious thing. We're just hearing that the media have been telling us, right? The anti-Mubarak Wurlitzer has been telling us that 40% or 50% of Egypt are below $2 a day. I would want to look into that. I've seen now conflicting reports about the actual economic performance of the Mubarak regime. According to some allegations, it's not as bad as all that. In some cases, they say that he actually had some successes. I have to suspend judgment on that because there hasn't been time to look into it. You may be dealing with government statistics that are not accurate, or indeed the international statistics may be the ones that are not accurate. But still, after the damage done to the economy, the damage done to the tourist industry and everything else, all the personal losses, increase the minimum wage for everybody, lower the prices of bread, cooking oil, fuel, and so forth. And now, internationally, since there is predictably a wave of sympathy with Egypt, declare a debt moratorium, freeze debt, stop all payments of principal and interest on international financial debt, starting with the International Monetary Fund, starting with the World Bank, starting with the other international lending institutions, but extending to all international financial debt. Do that now. There's a honeymoon, right? The world is having a honeymoon with Egypt. Great. Use that for something of permanent value. Declare a debt freeze. Declare a debt moratorium. And once you've done that, in effect, you have ousted the International Monetary Fund. Instead of doing what the junta would probably do, right? The junta will say, oh, we're military guys. We don't know what to do. Let's bring in the International Monetary Fund. Or Baradei would, of course, say, yes, bring in the International Monetary Fund, and Gonim, I'm sure, would be for that too. Don't do that. Kick out the IMF. Get rid of them. They have no success stories to their name, right? Oust them. Rather, it's time to think about some development projects, right? Suppose you're now in this junta. You want to stabilize yourself. What do you need to do? You need to create jobs. Create jobs, 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 jobs. How can you do that? Well, you got your two essential resources. We've talked about this before. You've got the Suez Canal. What should happen to it? Well, it has to be modernized. It's got to be widened. It's got to be improved. It's got to be kept up to date. You can use your own resources. Otherwise, China, an obvious candidate, Russia, other international engineering companies available, maybe somebody in Europe, who knows, but maybe in Italy, quite possible. So do something for the Suez Canal. Another thing is then you've got the Nile. I talked about the Tennessee Valley Authority for the Nile. I am now told that Ibrahim Kamel, this guy from Mubarak's personal circle, one of his long-term allies, Ibrahim Kamel, who seems to have organized some of those camels and horses to storm into the square a week ago Thursday, Ibrahim Kamel's website shows an extensive plan for irrigation of the Egyptian desert to use the water of the Nile, which right now is simply lost into the Mediterranean. All of that fresh water needed for the economic development of Africa. Kamel has a plan for taking a part of it and putting it out into the desert and using that for irrigation and agricultural production. And the more agricultural production you have in the wheat area, the less susceptible you will be to international financial blackmail. So there's also the obvious question of housing, right? It's always the case in countries like this that you can do your housing industry using purely in-country resources and create a huge amount of employment. So if you put that all together, you've got jobs for engineers, scientists, construction workers, and generally that's your stimulus. So go for it. Anybody who wants to stay in power will have to solve the economic problems. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.